If you can keep an eye on the cash and make sure you've got the cash that you need, then that makes life easier. We've been very focused on profit rather than turnover, because it's been that profit that's allowed us to grow organically, reinvest in new technology. No matter what size you are, if you can allocate at least some time or money to R&D and innovation, that will stand you in good stead. You can find good people, partners that you can collaborate with. That really helps you attack the market more widely than you would be able to otherwise. Not worry too much about competition. Of course, you've got to keep your eye on what the competition is doing, but it is very easy to get distracted and never be complacent.
WGIC Horizons, a podcast for latest technology, business, partnerships, and policy trends in geospatial industry.
Hello and welcome to Horizons, the World Geospatial Industry podcast. And welcome to this episode on the evolving business models we see in the geospatial industry. My name is Matthew Pennells. I'm with Esri Inc. and also the WGIC Treasurer. And my guest today is Rachel Tidmarsh, CEO of Bluesky International, now a Woolpert company. We'll move on to that part a little bit later in the conversation, but thanks so much for joining us, Rachel. If first of all, we could take you back to 2003, where it all began with Bluesky. Just wondered, what were the drivers? What made you set up the company in those initial early days?
Thanks, Matthew. Great to be here. So 2003 is where it all started for Bluesky, but actually it was kind of slightly prior to that. So 1996, I was actually involved in a management buyout from the department that I worked in at what was the National Remote Sensing Centre, now Airbus. And we had the buyout in 96, set up Wild Goose Publications, which primarily was doing aerial survey and also education products for schools. So we did that for 4 years. And then in 2000, in the dot-com boom, we were doing a lot of work for Get Mapping, who were creating the Millennium Map at the time. So we were doing all of the flying and the film processing, because we were using film cameras back then, and then all of the scanning as well. And so because of that, they decided to offer to acquire us, which we did, and we became part of Get Mapping for 3 years, which was great. And we were exposed to lots of things. There's a PLC that we wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. But after kind of 3 years, they got to a point where they really needed to make some savings. And so it was at that point that I actually approached the board and said, look, what about if we buy back what we sold you back in 2000? And that's what we did. And we set up Bluesky. So that's kind of how it came about. So yeah, a little bit of a potted history there, back to the 2000s and late 90s as well.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. And it's obviously great to see that organic growth and through its little pathways and so forth. And at that point, how was the aerial industry? Did you see a gap in the market, or was it a case of taking and seizing the opportunity and sort of seeing where the company went? Or did you have a sort of a clear plan and approach to things?
I think we felt, we really had something to offer. It was very competitive back then, actually. At that time, there were several aerial survey companies in the UK. So we had our work cut out. And at that time, there was a lot of pricing competition and so on. So we really had to kind of strive to be, delivering something to the customers, more than our competitors were. So, yeah, I think we saw a gap in the market for an agile company that could adapt to the market needs quickly, which is what we've always prided ourselves on, to be honest. I think that was probably, it was a risk at the time in terms of setting up and starting from scratch. And as you said, it's been organic growth through the whole of our period. We haven't had any huge investments. We've managed to get, government grants at times and things like that. But really, we have been reinvesting our profits as we go to invest in new technology, whether that's been, camera sensors or LiDAR sensors, software and hardware processing technology as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we've spoken before on this, but you said that you set up not just to sort of capture the data, but to evolve data sets on top of the data, and that was one of your differentiators. And how's that successful and been? And as you mentioned, being agile to sort of country needs, customer needs, and so forth. Was that one of the key things you think to success, not just being data collection, but an element of processing and sort of value add services and value add data sets?
Yeah, I think it comes back to exactly that, needing to, we've had peaks and troughs and what have you. And some of those things have led us to look for what we can do to add value rather than just selling, pixels or square kilometers of data. And so we've always been kind of outward looking in terms of looking at legislative situations that might mean our customers require something specific to be done, or looking at the marketplace in terms of what the requirement is. So looking at our national tree map, for example, that was something that came about. It's derived from our aerial photography and our height data, and its added value. It means that we can license, and so the more layers that we can extract from those data sets, the more revenue. Yeah, it's been something that we focused on doing, and we've always heavily invested. I say heavily as an SME. I'm not sure how heavily that is, but in innovation and R&D. So no matter what size we've been, we've always had at least somebody that is focused on, outward looking at how we can either improve our processes or create new products. So I think that's been one of our success stories, to be honest.
Yeah. Absolutely. Full transparency, in a previous life, I was a Bluesky customer. And when the tree map
You
came out, I was government. And it was because we were being told by, I can't remember the name of the legislation, to go find out where the trees were. And so you were perfectly matching the problem we were being given with a solution, which was here's a data service, not go find your own ways of extracting the trees. But we've done that for you. And that obviously, that worked in the sense of it took a pain point away from the customer side. And, as you said, more scalable, make it once, sell it many times.
That's exactly it. And, from your perspective, obviously that was the local authority market, but equally in the utilities, the power line companies very much needed to know the location of trees for interfering with their overhead cables. And from an insurance perspective as well, that was a big driver in terms of creating that product from a subsidence model issue. So, where is the location for tree compared to a building? Is that going to be close enough that it falls on the property, or it creates an issue from the drainage point of view in terms of causing subsidence as well? So yeah, those have been the kind of key. We always look to find, an application. How is it going to benefit the customer, rather than just saying we think this is a great idea, why don't we just create this, and actually end up finding out that it isn't something that's required in the market. So yeah.
Yeah, that element of market research, or evaluating products based on customer need, I think is key. You mentioned just now some of the peaks and troughs. Obviously, it's been 20 plus years, but if you could cast your mind back, what is maybe a couple of the peaks and a couple of the troughs, and how you navigated through them in sort of enjoying the highs and navigating the lows, if you don't mind sharing a few of those examples for the listeners.
There's over 30 years. There's definitely been a few of both of those. I suppose the first peak for us was back in around 2005 when Google Earth came out, and we were approached by Google for them to license our national data set. And this was obviously a fantastic opportunity for us. At the time, it was the largest licensing sale that we had ever. But we were almost caught between a rock and a hard place, because obviously on the one side, fantastic sale, but on the other side, they were obviously going to make it freely available, to a lot of our customers. But at the end of the day, if we didn't do it, potentially somebody else might have done it, and then we wouldn't have had the revenue either. But I think that was one of the driving forces for us to look at what else we could do in terms of adding value. So the lesson learned there was, right, this has become a bit of a commodity. What can we do to really extract more value out of the data sets that we're creating and investing in? So that was definitely a driver there. And then on the upside of that, again, it took a bit of time, because, on the local authority and the government side, it didn't really have an impact. But on the smaller clients that had been acquiring data from us, we lost a little bit of that revenue. So it did have an impact overall. But what it did do for us, going full circle, was it went from traditional users like the local authorities, maybe engineering companies, to create a whole host of customers for us that had never used aerial photography before. So the amount of different market sectors that now start using aerial photography, just went up exponentially. And then, of course, once they're using it, they want better and better data, better resolution. They want to know the provenance of the data, and they want it to be, the cadence and the updates to be as regular as possible. So it was a bit of a double-edged sword, to be honest, in terms of that. It was a peak and a difficult situation as well. And then I suppose, from a trough point of view, 2008 and 2009 with the recession were extremely difficult times for us. Added to which, I was actually on maternity leave at the time, which didn't last very long, because ended up coming back in, and we had to make some really difficult decisions, in terms of cost savings, and unfortunately some redundancies as well at the time. So I would say that's one of the hardest periods that we've experienced. It really was. And what it does do is make you acutely aware of the cash. I've been lucky enough to have some really great, experienced FDs over the time. And at that time, we had somebody in that always said to me, cash is king, Rachel, you need to focus on, the cash and what have you. And so it's always been something that's been, front and center for me in terms of cash flow. In fact, the team here probably have been sick over the years of me going on about it. But I think, those words really have stuck with me. And I think, if you can keep an eye on the cash and make sure you've got, the cash that you need, then that makes life easier. If you've got the money to sort issues out and problems, that's a different situation altogether. So yeah, that's something that we've really kept to heart.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, and obviously the cash flow in general, especially in the SME space, is it's key to survival. So I can speak to that as well. You also mentioned, any opportunity you have had to sort of reinvest into the company. Obviously, yes, you had to make some hard decisions there, but I'm sure you enjoyed hiring people back when things improved. You spoke about investing sort of in R&D and having, people looking into the future. Obviously technology's changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years. And from your perspective, obviously, probably from a 2D to a 3D, from a sort of, you say, the resolution of the data, and now things like, topics like digital twins, point clouds, everything emerging, feature extraction going from manual to the more automated, and obviously sort of not quite jumping right into the AI stuff we see now. But how have you kept up with the sort of the major tech changes on the sort of the sensor side and the data side? But in general, is that by sort of trying to be ahead of the curve, watching what others have done, and sort of following a little bit later, or sort of somewhere in the middle?
It's been a bit of both, to be honest. And sometimes being at the front of the curve has paid off, and sometimes it hasn't. As you say, absolutely, the customers, in terms of their demands, it's been for faster delivery, it's been for greater resolution, and also obviously cheaper pricing. Those are the drivers all the time. And as I say, we've been very focused on profit rather than turnover, I would say, because it's been that profit that's allowed us to grow organically, reinvest in new technology. So we've very much been focused on what the latest technology is that's been coming out on a camera basis and a LiDAR basis. So in about 2012, we bought our first LiDAR, and that was a huge risk for us, a huge amount of money for an SME to spend. But we invested in a sensor at the time that was one of the first hybrid sensors, which had a camera, a LiDAR, and a thermal sensor attached to it. It was a big risk, but it paid off, luckily, for us. So I think, that was a situation of where it's paid off. We've sometimes been slower to the market in terms of the digital camera, maybe further down the curve. So some of the problems that had happened initially had been ironed out, and we actually managed to get the advantage there. And then again, with our City Mapper 1 and 2, we've been at the front Edge, some of the first acquirers of those sensors, which has put us in ahead of the game again, in terms of, you mentioned digital twins. Obviously, the city mappers have allowed us to capture nadir, oblique, and LiDAR all together. We've created some great data sets for some of the local authorities in the UK and overseas as well. It's that constant, it changes all the time, the technology, and it can make a huge amount of difference. And what we've done, kind of watched, if there's just a small increment in terms of maybe, say, the footprint size that's being captured, it isn't that significant. We've skipped a generation and waited until, it's made a real different change. But, combination today in terms of the Vexel cameras that we're using and aircraft using, that's made quite a difference. In the UK, we've got to maximise our weather windows. May hasn't been actually that great, but we're hoping for some good weather next week. It's looking optimistic. But I think it's that. And then we've also invested, in terms of innovation and R&D, we have a team that's looking at AI, machine learning, and I think in terms of improving our workflows internally and the cost savings that we can make. But again, as you say, the automatic feature extraction, that's meant in terms of the data set that we've got nationally, high data and imagery, that we can really, maximize what we can get out of that. There's so many feature details in there, whether it's porous information, non-porous surfaces. We've been extracting building footprints, manhole covers. I mean, the list goes on and on. They're really key layers that we haven't previously been able to extract, but we're now being able to do it at an affordable price, and they're really meeting the customers' requirements, in terms of what they're looking to achieve as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, where things that they may have been there before, they just weren't cost effective to either manually digitize or invest in automation as well. I guess so. On the other side of the business, and sort of, I say, the business models. I mean, you've gone from, I guess, delivering, DVDs, CD drives, through to now, web services. And how's that changed sort of the business models? I mean, was it a case of capture? You pay for capture, you get the delivery, and I guess now you into a market where it's almost sort of, information as a service, or data as a service, information as a service, or insight as a service. And I imagine you still approach a range, but how's that changed over the years as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a significant change in terms of that, because obviously the bigger the resolution, the more storage is required. So, we did used to deliver on CDs and DVDs and, sticks and what have you, and we still do that for some customers in terms of hard drives. There are certain customers, in the security area that won't have data served up. They want it delivered, securely. And depending on the size of the data, if they actually want to hold it themselves and host it themselves, then obviously we're still looking at hard drives and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. We've got models now which are subscription based, which makes it much more flexible for customers. They can basically sign up, consume as much or as little as they want to, and covering the whole country as well. So rather than having to just commit to a certain area, we've got national companies that we're dealing with that need data from literally Scotland, Wales. If they can sign up to this, it means they can stream it directly into their software and use it alongside their other data sets. And then obviously we've had the map shot for quite a long time as well. So if somebody does want to not necessarily have it streamed, but they want to just go in and buy a certain square kilometre of data or a certain area and a whole raft of other data layers, we've got some open data that's freely available on the website, as well as our sold products. And that's quite a good outlet in terms of people being able to go and immediately get an FTP link and deliver to them, if they're looking at small areas. So yeah, it has changed significantly.
So it's fantastic that now we've moved into an era where Bluesky has been acquired by Woolpert, and so congratulations on that. Where you can, what was that experience like, for something you've built over 20, 30 years to have those discussions? Was it always your plan, or how did that sort of come up, and how's it felt to move into that next era of the company?
Yeah, I mean, it was the plan when we set up in 2003. I think originally I was thinking, 5 years will be the exit strategy. Yeah, so some time on from that, we've got to the point. Yeah, we obviously back in 2 or 3 years ago, we literally started to get approached by people. I mean, we do get approached. We have been approached several times over that period of time, but it's never been the right time for us, and the right fit. And in this occasion, we basically ended up having 2 or 3 companies all came at once like buses, which was a good position for us to be in because we could have a little bit of a mini competition. But in terms of Woolpert, who were obviously our choice, it was about them understanding the sort of work that we do, because they do obviously very similar stuff, but on a global basis. But also about the fit in terms of the culture and the values. So I think they've got a very team oriented, collaboration, progressive, industry leading, supportive environment, and that fits very well with our values and culture as well. So that was the reason really behind us choosing Woolpert to go with. And yeah, it was a year actually at the end of April since we first did the deal. So it's gone really, really quickly, but it's been a very positive experience, I think, from our side of things. It really has opened up opportunities. I think what it's allowing, just to give you an example, the machine learning AI team, we're creating national tree map. We've been working with the APAC team down in Australia, and they've got clients that are looking to do a similar sort of thing. So we've been able to, support them in terms of the work they're doing there. And likewise, we're getting support. There's an AI team based in the US that we've been working closely with as well. So I think the opportunity from a Bluesky perspective to be able to push our products and services and to help support, the model that we've got is quite unusual for an aerial survey company in terms of having product as well as doing projects. Usually it's more project based. So I think that model that we have is something that will put to pick up on as well. And then the fact that we're an AEG company, merely means that we're in a position to deliver end-to-end solutions for the customers now. So, we've on the geospatial side, so right through from, initial surveys through to the design element, through to the buildings, we've got the whole suite. So I think being part of that's quite a unique proposition actually out in the market, the AEG side of things. So that's positioning us in a very strong, especially with digital twins as well. So we've got all of the elements. You've got the spatial anchor, and then we've got the design side of it and the infrastructure. And I think creating these models that can be used again and again as live, dynamic, living ecosystems basically gets the best return on investment for the customers. But also, it means that in terms of maintaining, whether it's a site or a city or whatever, that whole thing becomes a living, breathing, dynamic thing that can be constantly updated and have live feeds coming in, whether it's weather information, air quality, traffic information, and what have you. So yeah, we're seeing some exciting things going on at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's another key point because I think we've seen the digital twin obviously, is now sort of settling down into a thing after being a big hype, but also we see many people saying, I want a digital twin and not realizing it's a transactional, is a living element. So to see companies now that have the ability to go from capture to delivery so that the customers can realize I can't just need to capture once. I need to, what is it I want to know annually? What is it I need to know every minute and everything in between as well? So that's a key point. If I could just take you back to one element you said there about sort of, you've been approached a number of times over the years and, but acquisition needed to feel right at the right time. And you said the buses arrived all at once, but that's I think that's a really key point. It's really excited to probably have your first approach as an acquisition, but you've got to measure it against, as you said, fit for the culture, fit for the company, timing of the company, obviously the financials. But I think that's a really key point. And what did it feel like that first acquisition approach to sort of say no? Was that quite hard, or is no, it just didn't feel right, so you trusted that another one would be coming around the corner?
Yeah, I think well, you never know whether it's going to come around the corner or not. You hope, and we do the right things that we hope it's going to attract that kind of attention. But yeah, I think, we've been approached before, and if I'm honest, in my heart of hearts, I knew it wasn't right. And it, for one reason or another, didn't come to fruition on this occasion. But this time round, I think we knew it was the right time. We'd almost taken Bluesky to the point we've had organic growth and we've reinvested. But I think for us to really have that step up, it needed some significant investment. So yeah, I think it was the right time. It was the right time for the company. It was the right time for me personally and the senior team. And I think, in terms of the team, it's obviously given them a huge opportunity as well.
And then if I may, more down to the personal side of acquisition, you've been at the helm of Bluesky all those years and now seeing the transition through the acquisition and so forth. Is that an exciting time where you're beginning to feel that you can let go, or it's your baby, you want to still be in control? How's that felt in regards to the success of the acquisition? But I guess there's also a pretty significant transition as a leader of the company as well.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's one of the things, you say about it being my baby, and I've joked about that previously. I've got a daughter, but this is my second child, really. And, so from that perspective, it is part of you, in terms of over 30 years, you've lived and breathed it for 24/7. But that's part of the reason I think I knew that Woolpert was the right company, because I didn't feel the sense of loss that maybe I thought I would feel. So I think from that perspective, it helped me, realize it was the right company and it was the right time. So yeah, and then going through a brand transition at the moment. So you will have seen, the logo. We've got Bluesky, a Woolpert company, and then by the end of this year, then we will be fully branded into the Woolpert family. So I think, that's something that has been easier than I thought it would be in terms of seeing that. I know, Bluesky is a strong brand in the UK, but we've got great technology, great people, and hopefully our customers realise, it's just a case of us moving under a new umbrella. But ultimately it's the same team behind it, same technology, and with the same good service that we've been offering for the last 30 years. But yeah, I think the integration, I'll be lying if I said it was all a bed of roses. Of course it's it is difficult as well, because you've got new systems and new processes that everybody's got to learn. That's a big change for everybody, and yeah, it's not easy. But I'm sure when we come out the other side, it will be a better place for us to be, and we'll all be on the same system. So it should make life easier in the long run.
Yeah, but as I say, worth it in the long run, but exciting times nonetheless.
Yeah.
That's been really interesting. I wonder, as we begin to wrap up, if it could take us back to a little bit more your journey. I guess you spoke at the beginning a little bit how Bluesky came to be formed through those other companies, but your role, your journey towards being a CEO. Was it something you always set out to do? Was it something you took that opportunity you said there when Get Mapping was you needed to make that leap? Was that something was that something you sat out and thought? You said maybe it was for 5 years and then something else, but how's your personal journey? Not saying right back to school, but as you left and started work, was it always a case of getting to the top, or opportunities presented themselves and you grabbed them and ran with them? How's it been for your own journey, from up to the CEO role and now into the broader leadership ecosystem of a global company?
Yeah, I think well, it's been a journey. I did a degree in GIS, so that's my background, and then went to work for the National Remote Sensing Centre for a year, after which time we had the management buyout. And I suppose that was one pivotal moment, because I very much could have stayed there. I was asked if I wanted to stay, and instead of that, for whatever reason, I decided to take some leap into the abyss. And I wasn't earning a lot of money at all at the time when we first set up back in '96. So it was a risk, but it was a risk that has eventually paid off. It's taken a while to get to that point, but I think I always wanted to to have the autonomy, I suppose, of being able to make my own decisions and to be able to choose the direction that we were going in. So I've been fortunate from that position, because obviously after doing that and then selling and then coming out of that again and then setting up Bluesky, has been a little bit of a journey. But yeah, I think, and obviously I haven't had training to be a CEO. That is something I was just literally thrust in. So I've been involved with everything from finance to sales and marketing, from production. I haven't been up in the plane operating the sensors, but that's about the only thing I haven't done. And so, it gives you that wide base. I think it's been a sink or swim, getting on with it. And, I enjoy it. I did GIS, like I say. I love geography. The one thing I will say to everybody is do something that you're passionate about. And I am passionate about what we do. Obviously, it has its difficult moments, but I think in terms of, for me, seeing how the data that we produce is used by the customers and can benefit our customers, and actually the world, the environment, everything else, the impact that we have, I think is something that's really, what I've found rewarding, what's kept me going as well. And we've wanted to be at the forefront of the industry. We've wanted to create a great company for our team as well. So all of these things have been the driver in terms of getting to this point. And yeah, it's a completely different situation, obviously, being part of a global company. I've worked for myself for 30 years. And so to then suddenly be thrust into a company of 3,000 plus people is a different scenario. So I'm still getting to grips with that. But everybody's been, really welcoming and supportive. And what it means is we have got that support that, we haven't had previously. If it's been HR things or legal things, we've all got involved in that. Whereas now we've got obviously departments and designated people. So that makes life a lot easier from that perspective.
That's fantastic. That's a really great perspective. And then I guess as we wrap up, then, I mean, our listeners, maybe people that are, at that junction of setting up companies, running younger companies, or more mature small and medium enterprises as well. I guess I'd phrase, what would your advice to those people now doing, keep head down and carry on. The success is around the corner. There are peaks and troughs, but also would you go back and do it all again in the late 90s, and then through those transitions, would you do it all again?
I would. I would. I might moan about things every now and again, but I would. I've lived it, and I would. If anybody is in the position where they're either just starting out or thinking about doing it, I'd say go for it. I really would. I think in terms of advice of stuff that I think has helped us in terms of get to the position that we were in, I think investing in marketing is something I would say is absolutely crucial and key. I think a lot of small businesses don't necessarily do that. When we first set out, our FD at the time had come from an engineering background, and he, kept saying to me, "I can't believe you're spending this money on. Why do you want to spend money on PR and marketing and what have you?" But then he eventually saw, how that was benefiting us, generating leads. It's allowed it to punch above our weight over that time as well. A lot of times people have said to me, "Oh, I thought you were bigger than you are." So it really has given us opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have had. In terms of leads and so on, it helps significantly. I think the other thing, obviously, that I always already mentioned earlier was innovation and R&D. I think, having that outward looking at what's happening outside, how the markets is going, and, looking ahead so that you're always ahead of the game, basically looking at. And I think we've been quite good at that. I think, no matter what size you are, if you can allocate at least some time or money to R&D and innovation, that will stand you in good stead. And I think collaboration as well is something we have, as a small business, you cannot do everything, you're spread really thinly. And so I think if you can find good people, partners that you can collaborate with, and that really helps you attack the market more widely than you would be able to otherwise. And then, yeah, I think focusing on profits and reinvesting is also something that I would say to not worry too much about competition. Of course, you've got to keep your eye on what the competition is doing, but it is very easy to get distracted on posts that you see or adverts that you see that your competitors are doing. And I think it's quite easy to get in a downward spiral on that if you're not careful of staying focused on what you're doing. And never be complacent, I would say. Always keep looking over the shoulder of who's coming and don't think, don't take it for granted. I think continually throughout the time, I've always thought, this could go tomorrow if we don't stay ahead of the game and keep our eye on the prize. So, never be complacent.
Well, that is absolutely fantastic advice to end on there to people who are in this position and growing businesses across the industry. So thank you so much for that, Rachel. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining this episode of Horizons, and thank you to Rachel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn as we continue to advance technology and policy matters relevant to the geospatial sector and create business opportunities for the industry.
Like, subscribe and share to help us spread insightful geospatial conversations.